We're good to go, Ted. You ready?
I'm ready when you are.
The maestro, the main man himself is ready. Okay, in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, yes, you are seeing right. You're definitely seeing right. With me, I've got. You can't mention the urban Kenyan music industry and not mention this man. He is responsible for putting Kenya's music industry on the map. If I was to do an intro with him, it would take too long, man. So, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for none other than the maestro, Ted Josiah.
Sema.
Hey, first of all, Ted, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here. More than honored.
Karibu
Thank you so much for allowing this to happen.
Karibu sana. I'm about to shade you, but I'll do that later on. We go way back.
Yeah. So what we're doing here is basically just having a conversation, me and you.
Yeah.
And guys are lucky that they get to eavesdrop into our conversation.
Yeah.
So man, dude, you're you're responsible for so many artists. Every single person who have interviewed on the Playhouse has mentioned your name.
That's good. That's good to know, man. I say this. I just did the little part that God allowed me to do in people's lives. Just a little impact.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest has blossomed into, different people's careers taking off, which is, I thank God for that, man. I thank God.
We thank God for you. Okay, so let me throw this thing way back.
Yeah.
I want us to start from the beginning.
Yeah.
When did you fall in love with music, and when did this passion for music begin?
I fell in love with music when I was a little kid. I must have been 4 or 5 there. I lived in Chicago with my dad, and Dad used to take me to the record stores every Saturday morning, and it was just our thing. Nobody else. Me and Dad go to the record stores, and he'd be choosing music. He was into Bob Marley. One wonders why and what his past is like. Mm-hmm. But he was into Bob Marley and the Eagles and Cat Stevens and that kind of music, and I used to listen to it a lot, and I'd also pick up records. I remember one of the records I picked up was Steve Miller and the Steve Miller Band. People don't know, but that guy is responsible for a lot of vocoder stuff back in the 70s. And so that's when my passion for music started, because I had my own little record player in my room. Mm-hmm. My dad had bought for me. So I'd go and listen to music in my room a lot. Obviously being a firstborn, you can't mix with the adults. You're older than all the other kids, so you spend a lot more time in your room. And I spent a lot of time creating and listening to music. So that's where my passion started,
Can I ask what year this is? Just give us a...
Gosh, that was between 1974 and 1978. That's when the seeds were being thrown into my life for the passion of music. I remember being in one of the school plays in Chicago and singing one of the songs, Welcome to Georgia, an old song, and really falling in love with music. I remember when I first moved to the States, I just knew Kikuyu, Luo. Kikuyu, Luo, and a broken Kiswahili. No English.
No, nothing.
At all, because I grew up in Nyahururu with my grandma. So what happened was, I got to school in Chicago, this little black kid, in the middle of winter, and there was a band. They came to school to perform, and the guy was playing a trumpet. And my whole life, at that particular point, I must have been 4 years old. At that point, my life changed. Most people don't remember what happened to them when they were 4, but I can recall those moments very clearly. That's how much impact they had on me. So music just became a part of my life. I remember then during the school holidays when we had come back to Kenya, I would spend a lot of time on the farm, and I'd take a panga and make it into a guitar and start pretending I'm singing along. And I had aunties and uncles who were all into music, so they'd all be singing and we'd be listening to the radio. And that's how music got birthed into me. Later on, when I started my high school, I had the privilege of listening to Guido and his band, African Roots. And
where'd you go to high school?
I went to high school in all over the place, but I ended up in Kajiado and then Eastleigh High. I moved from Kajiado because I wanted to do art. And Kajiado was really a science. All Kajiado High was really based on sciences and agriculture. So I moved to Eastleigh because it was a place where, fine art was being offered. So one day I'm listening to African Heritage. I managed to watch them live and I listened to Guido play the bass. And that also impacted on my life. I didn't know who he was or what the name of the band was or anything. But much later on in life, I remembered when I met Guido later on and he recorded our first album, Pete and I.
Yeah.
I remembered, I had seen this guy. And this guy is actually part of the reason why I wanted to become a musician. So yeah, it's been a journey.
Yo, that's been an absolute. So okay, now in school, were you already singing? Had you in high school?
In high school, I never sang. I never played an instrument. I was just an artist. I would paint and sculpt. That was when I was in high school, I thought that I was actually going to end up either as a sculptor or a painter. Those were the things that I was really passionate about. And those were the things that would drive me every single day. I just wanted to paint and sculpt. Later on, I found out I could do graphics. And I found out graphics was slightly more commercial than doing all this painting stuff, Painting, I'd be waiting for painting to sell for in fact, I think I only sold 2 paintings on my painting life. But in school, I never did sing. It's when I finished high school. And I finished high school, and what happened was I became a born-again Christian just as I was transitioning and finishing high school. And I went to Nairobi Baptist, and I saw what the youth were doing in terms of singing. I thought, I think I could do this. Then I realized I'm a baritone. Everybody likes the tenors and the altos, and nobody likes the Barry Whites. You know what I mean? So I started just doing background vocals more and not lead vocals. And then I realized, no, they're making mistakes. In the arrangement and in the digital space, there's different things that are happening, and we can start putting the music together like this. And what if you do this with the intro and stuff? And I didn't know that what was happening was I was becoming a producer.
Yeah.
I was just arranging stuff and telling people, no, don't do this here. Wait until this particular portion and then do that. And then people would go into the studio and say, hey, we need Ted, the technician, to come in and just balance stuff in. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was just playing it by ear and moving the faders up and down, for things to balance. So I think I mixed my first album when I must have been 18 years old.
So okay, at this I'm hearing you from the perspective of producing vocal arrangements.
Yeah.
Bring the bridge in a bit later. But at this time, have you played an instrument?
I have dabbled in playing instruments because I needed to understand, So I started playing bass, I started playing drums, I started playing keys. And then I realized what I need to do is I need to understand how all of this meshes together.
Yeah.
So on top of playing the instruments, I started learning to play keys when I was 20 years old.
Yo.
For real. I started really late.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, yo.
And it was, what happened was somebody once came to visit me at home, and we had a piano. And she looked at the piano and asked me, so all along you've got a musical instrument in your house and you don't play? There's no YouTube, there's no, you have to go buy a book and learn how to. And she said, why don't you just do it from your heart? Play what you feel. And as soon as she left, I went onto that piano and started, banging on the keys and trying to figure it out. And then I'd ask friends, okay, so show me 2, 3, 4 basic chords. And they would show me, this is how you play the chords, and I would pick that up. And then I just started every single day. I'd spend like 6-8 hours figuring it out, because I knew that I needed to understand the keyboard, the piano, to be able to really express what was in my head. Because before that, I had a lot of musical ideas, but it would be hard to tell a person, you know, what's in my head.
To package it.
Yeah, it was really hard. But when I had the instrumental knowledge now, I'd be able to say, this is what I'm hearing, so can we do this?
Yeah.
And that helped me transition. And then at that particular point, music had moved from the analog space slightly into the digital space. It was the introduction of keyboard sequencers. So the keyboard sequencer
When you say digital space, just so that guys don't start thinking you're talking about YouTube and stuff.
Yeah. Well, prior to that, what would happen is you would play the music live. Everybody would grab their instrument and play it live and record it on tape. Real tape. Yeah. So it was really all analog.
Yes.
And we were moving into the late 90s, late 80s, early 90s. At that particular point, there were people who were making keyboards now, and the keyboards were beginning to be able to have memory and be able to record instruments on them, and people were sampling like the drums and sampling trumpets, and it sounded horrible. But
as compared to live.
Yeah. but at least you had that accessible to you. You know, you could now play your drums on the keyboard and record them, and then play your keys, and then play your bass. And Joe Pepe, Joe Kirago from Five Alive, was the first guy who had an Ensoniq. The Ensoniq was a great keyboard with great keyboard sounds and great drum sounds and everything, and reverbs and stuff. So I'd go to Joe's place, and the understanding with Joe was, you bring a loaf of bread. That was his payment. And he would do the sequences, but it would be based on the ideas in your head. So that's why I needed to understand how to play keys. So I'd play keys and show him, this is the sequence. And then he'd say, oh, that sounds good. Why don't you just record it yourself? And I realized, oh, actually, I can do this thing that Joe's doing. And Joe was just doing it, you know, part-time, because he was the keyboardist in their church. So he was just doing it for fun. And then a mate of ours came from the UK and gave us a keyboard and a sequencer and and I started making the music myself. I just started making the music myself and composing the stuff myself. And that's when Pete and I actually joined forces and started Hart. So in Hart is where I got a lot of my understanding of how to produce music and play my role in a band. My role wasn't really leadership of the band, but more the bed. You know, the music of it all, the reasoning behind the music, when we go out to minister, why we are going to use these songs as opposed to these songs, and how we're going to do our intros, our outros, how we're going to dress. And I would just leave Pete to do his thing on stage, and I'd be playing the drums and putting the sequencer on, and so I was literally the engine of the band.
Yeah.
But not,
the face.
You never see the engine, it's in a bonnet. Yeah. So people would see me, but not really see me. They would see Pete, and they would see Sally and Esther, because they were in the front. And then I realized, actually, I'm comfortable developing musicians. This must have been around 93. And a gentleman came from Nigeria, Pastor Nee. And Pastor Nee came to me and said, God is going to use you, and God is going to use you to open up doors for a lot of musicians. God is going to use you, and you're going to be like the Quincy Jones of Africa.
He said those words.
He said those words verbatim, and I thought, this man is just mad. This is a madman, because at that point, I'm still learning. Do you understand?
Yeah.
I can't say I'm Quincy Jones at this point. I'm like, dude, wow.
Have you produced at this time? I mean, of course.
At this time, I've produced. No, I've produced one album, and Pete and I are still trying to grapple with putting our album together. And
who's that one album you had produced?
I had produced an album for a guy from Eldoret, Moy University. I really can't remember his name because it was such a long time ago. And it's an album I produced in River Road, you know, just using my stuff. He had listened to the music we did and said, I want you to do me an album. Can you do the instrumentation? I said, okay, fine, come in and let's do it. And he had paid me something like 1,000 bob, and I thought, oh wow, I can make money off of this. So I hadn't really gotten into the space yet when this pastor was saying this. I thought, if God is going to use me, how is God going to use me at this particular point when the knowledge I have is so limited? And that's why I had a bed and my keyboard set up. And I would get off the bed straight onto the keyboard setup every single day, and I wouldn't leave the house. I just wouldn't leave the house. And what happened was it took about maybe 2-3 years for me to just hone that skill. One day, Jimmy Gatto was asked by some studio owner if he knew somebody who could make music for a commercial. And Jimmy says, oh yeah, you know, there's a guy called Ted who doesn't live too far from here, who makes music all the time. You should use him. So Jimmy calls me and says, hey, come over. There's this guy who wants you to make something for him. So I go to the studio and I make the music, and I literally did this in like 15 minutes. And the guy looked at me and said, so what do you do for a living? I said, well, this is what I do. Is
just in a group.
Yeah. And he says, no, I want to give you a full-time job as a music producer because you're so good at this. And I said, music what? He said, music producer. I think, oh, so there's actually a title for what I do? And he says, yeah, I'm going to have to train you in terms of sound engineering, but I can't even touch you. This guy had been a musician since 1970. And he's saying this to me. He's saying, I've never seen anyone in this country who's doing this thing that you're doing. And you understand it so well. I said, well, I've just been, tinkering about at home. And he says, well, you got the job. So not only did I get that job to do that commercial, but then I joined Sync Sound Studios.
That's now how.
Yes, that's how I got into Sync Sound Studios.
A good big shout out to Jimmy for.
Yeah, if it wasn't for Jimmy, I wouldn't have been at Sync Sound, which means I wouldn't have done Hardstone. I wouldn't have done Shades of Black. I wouldn't have done Hart, the second album, which was the first CD ever.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have done Richard Kawesa.
Hold on. The second album of Hart was the first time now you were moving from tapes to CD.
To CD, yes.
Okay, explain to me now. I mean, because guys, when you're saying Hart, people don't understand that Hart was the Sauti Soul of then.
Yes.
Like, explain that. How did it feel to go from production into now you guys are superstars, but then at the same time, there's this whole church vibe that is not really feeling you, even though that's what you're doing? I'm trying to get that transition.
Man, for me personally, it was really hard because I knew that God was calling me not just for gospel musicians, but he was calling me for musicians as a whole. And I'm trying to explain this to my mates, even within Hart, and they're not getting it. They're like, God is calling you to go out and work with anyone. And I'm saying, yeah, that's what he's doing. And they're like, no, we're a gospel group. We stay a gospel group. If you want to produce music, you produce gospel music, not secular music. And I'm saying, well, that's where I feel led at this time in my life, and I just can't stop it. And he said, well, okay, Pete and I at that particular point, Pete wanted to be a pastor. I'm not feeling the pastor vibe at all. I'm just like, you know what, you do you, mate. I'm gonna be on this particular side, and whenever you need us to, I'm cool. And the church itself, from inception of Hart, the church constantly knocked us hard. The church knocked us hard because, one, I had dreadlocks, I had braids, I used to wear all these multicolored outfits and stuff, and nowadays I'm really chilled. But when I was younger, I was like, I'm gonna dress like the wildest rebel possible. And the reason I would do that is because I wanted young people to see that you can be you and still love God. Just be you. And there's no point in you pretending and removing all of these outer layers. God won't love you more because you've removed these outer layers of you. God wants the inner layer. So that's why I would dress like that, and sometimes I would go to churches, on Sunday, and the pastors there's once a pastor said, all right, so if the person sitting next to you needs to be born again, please bring them down here. And man, it would be like a rugby tackle on me every time, because I'd be in the leather jackets. I'm the guy who looks least born again. And the funny thing is, I'm the minister. I'm the guy who's going around the country performing in different universities and high schools, and young people are getting born again. That's me. But in church, people don't see that. People were seeing the outer layer. And for me, that's when I started realizing that, this church vibe for me is not really working. I've been called to actually go and impact in people's lives, have a real impact. Now, when I look back at that, I'm thankful that I did that, because I did have an impact in people's lives, and a positive one at that. I look at people like Hart and what he managed to do. I look at Shades of Black, what they managed to do. I look at Eric Ornaina. I look at Susanna Wio, Achieng Abura, Gidi Gidi Maji Maji, Kei Shaka. It's a huge list. And a lot of people, all they needed to do was they needed somebody to stand in the door and let them through. Exactly what that pastor had told me was going to happen. That's exactly what happened, Stand in the door and let these people through. Give them a chance.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about you letting people through the door, and I really love this transition from synth sound.
Yeah.